A federal agent walks into his own bedroom, gun drawn. He would later claim he'd found his wife's attacker. That's the story he told police, within minutes of 2 people dying in his house. It took 3 years and his own mistress to prove it wasn't true. This is the story of a federal agent who used his own badge as an alibi for murder. And somewhere in it is a man who had no idea he'd already been chosen to die, in a house he'd never been to, for a fantasy that was never real. On a February morning in 2023, in a quiet Virginia suburb, a 37-year-old nurse named Christine Banfield was getting her family ready for the day. By the time it ended, she would be dead. So would a man she had never met. If you'd seen her husband at school pickup, you would have assumed he was one of the good ones. Brendan Banfield was a special agent with the IRS, a badge, a government-issued gun, and the kind of job that comes with the public's default trust. They had a young daughter, and like a lot of families in that part of Virginia, they had an au pair living in the house, 25-year-old Juliana Peres Magalhães from Brazil. On the outside, it looked like an ordinary, comfortable life. Here's the detail that changes how you should read everything that follows. The affair didn't grow out of the au pair arrangement. It came first. Court records show Banfield began a relationship with Magalhães in August of 2022, months before she formally became the family's au pair at all. What no one outside that house knew yet, according to what would later come out in court, was that the marriage everyone saw from the outside had already ended, in every way that mattered, before the woman living down the hall ever unpacked a suitcase. If cases like this, the ones where the official story and the real story don't match, are what keeps you watching, subscribing helps us keep making them. According to Magalhães' own trial testimony, Banfield had told her months before the killings that he wanted to marry her, have children with her, but a divorce, he told her, would cost him. His wife would end up with more money than he would, and he wanted custody of their daughter. Picture the calculation underneath that. Not a man falling out of love, a man doing the math on what leaving would cost him, and deciding murder was cheaper. So prosecutors say they didn't divorce, they planned, and the planning left a paper trail. On January 28, 2023, 4 weeks before the killings, Banfield bought a firearm. Court records show he trained Magalhães with it himself at a local gun range in the weeks that followed. This wasn't a moment of panic, it was a rehearsal. Somewhere in that plan was a stranger, a man named Joseph Ryan, 39 years old, from Springfield, Virginia. The kind of person his own mother would later describe as someone who spent his life fighting for the underdog, even the neglected dogs nobody else wanted. An account calling itself Christine Banfield reached out to him on a fetish website, offering a fantasy. The account calling itself Christine wasn't Christine at all. It was Magalhães, using Christine's own phone. Joseph Ryan hadn't been invited into someone's fantasy. He'd been cast as a killer for a murder that hadn't happened yet. Days before it did, prosecutors say, Banfield had Magalhães message Ryan one more time on Telegram to lock down the details. Confirm he was coming. Confirm when. On February 24, 2023, Joseph Ryan drove to a house on Stable Brook Way, believing he was about to meet a woman for a consensual encounter. He had no idea he'd never spoken to her at all. What happened next, prosecutors would later lay out almost minute by minute. Banfield turned his wife's phone off and hid it in a kitchen drawer. Then he left the house and waited nearby at a McDonald's, close enough to come back fast. When Ryan arrived, Magalhães called both Christine's phone and Banfield's, exactly as she'd been told to. Banfield came home. He didn't walk in the front door. He came in through the basement with Magalhães and with his own 4-year-old daughter. He left the little girl downstairs. Then he went up alone. Upstairs in the bedroom, he announced himself as a police officer. Then he shot Joseph Ryan in the head with his own service-issued firearm. Magalhães made a 911 call. It lasted only seconds, cut short, prosecutors say, at Banfield's direction. Then prosecutors say Banfield turned on his wife. He stabbed Christine himself with a knife he'd had Ryan unknowingly bring into the house. When Ryan showed any sign of movement, Magalhães shot him again. A second 911 call went out. This one told a different story, an intruder, attacking Christine, stopped by the husband who'd come home just in time. Banfield rode with his wife to the hospital. Christine hadn't died at the scene. She was still alive when they left the house. She died later from her injuries. Magalhães went to police headquarters. She brought the 4-year-old with her. For a while, the story they'd told held. It didn't hold for long. The case sat with investigators for more than a year and a half before anyone was arrested. Magalhães was taken into custody first, in October 2023, about 8 months after the killings, and charged with second-degree murder. In police interviews, she admitted to shooting Ryan and gave an account that matched the physical and digital evidence investigators had already gathered. In 2024, she pleaded guilty to manslaughter instead, in exchange for testifying against Banfield. Banfield himself wasn't arrested for almost another full year. In the fall of 2024, roughly 570 days after the murders, he wasn't caught by a break in the case. He was pulled over in a routine traffic stop in Fairfax County. By then, investigators said they'd found something they called instrumental to the case. A photo, taken inside the house, of a framed picture of Banfield and Magalhães together, sitting on the nightstand in the master bedroom, dated October 13th. Other photos showed the two of them together on multiple occasions. There was evidence he'd been taking Portuguese lessons, and investigators found a Brazilian passport that, they said, belonged to her. A relationship he'd go on to deny in court had been photographed in his own bedroom the whole time. At his trial, he took the stand himself. According to his own testimony, which the jury would go on to reject, he said Magalhães called him about a stranger in the house, that he ran upstairs, gun drawn, and found Christine with Ryan, that she shouted a warning, that he fired because he believed Ryan was stabbing his wife. "I was extremely terrified," he told the jury. "I don't think I've ever been more panicked in my life." 16 jurors, 9 men, 7 women, 4 of them alternates, spent 4 weeks hearing both versions. Prosecutors told the story the evidence supported, that Banfield had stabbed Christine himself, then staged the scene afterward, moving her blood onto Ryan's hands to make an innocent man look like a killer. In February 2026, the jury decided which version was true. They convicted him on every count. In June of 2026, Brendan Banfield stood in front of the judge, who would decide how the rest of his life went. He still said he was innocent. "I was found guilty of a crime that I did not commit," he told the court. Judge Penny Ascaret didn't agree. She told him that in 18 years on the bench, she had only twice before seen something like this, a defendant who was remorseless, calculated. "The level of cruelty, calculation, and inhumanity in this case," she said, "reflects something far deeper than anger or impulse. It reflects evil." She sentenced him to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. She also told him something else, that in the months of planning, in everything he'd done, he had not once thought about the person who'd actually have to live with what he did. Not once, she said. thinking of the impact on Christine's daughter, the unspoken, tragic victim of your behavior. Christine's sister spoke next. He could have divorced and moved on, Danielle Hocker told the court. But divorce would have required relinquishing control, and control was always the priority. His actions were not driven by love, but a desire for power. And Joseph Ryan's mother, Deirdre Fisher, spoke about the man her son actually was not the role he'd been cast in. He had a face, he had a name, he had a life, she said. But Brendan Banfield shot his face, soiled his name, and treated his life as disposable. The man in that bedroom, gun drawn, told police he was the one who stopped a killer. It took a jury, a courtroom, and the woman he'd planned it all with turning against him, to prove that the only person he was protecting that morning was himself. What does it take to actually know somebody?